Like this?
More people coming on African time.
There will be more people coming on African time.
I'm just proud that y'all
It's
here
Black
right
History
now,
Month.
so.
There you go. All right. Well, we are. Hi, Slavo. Hi. Okay. Well, we're going to start off, and then the others can come in and join. Good evening. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Thais, and I am the cultural curator at China and Tamsna, which is a hotel in the Palmeraie here. And I'm very excited to welcome today CEBO Campbell, our new creative in residence. And I'm also very excited to collaborate for the second time with Booklore, this wonderful space. You know, I remember even growing up here and thinking, where can I even buy books? You know, you always have to bring them in from abroad. It's so special to have a beautiful bookstore here, and particularly special to be able to have a space where we can all come together and, you know, celebrate stories and have interesting discussions. Marrakesh really needs this, and I'm so glad that for those of you who are visiting, you get to be a part of the conversation. So a little on CEBO. CEBO Campbell is a writer and cultural storyteller whose work lives at the intersection of memory, imagination, and place. He's the author of the best-selling novel Sky Full of Elephants, now being adapted for film with Lawrence Fishburne's Cinema Gypsy Productions. It's his company, which is called Cinema Gypsy Productions, and the forthcoming Wells with Water with Simon & Schuster. Beyond the page, CEBO is the founder of Another, a studio devoted to authored storytelling across books, film, and shared spaces. His work invites us not to just read stories, but discover how special we all are on every page. And I'll let you take it away. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm always weirded out when people read those because I'm right here and it's strange. Firstly, thanks to Booklore for hosting this. This is my first. I've been in Marrakesh for like 3 hours, and I'm already at a bookstore, which seems appropriate. So thank you guys, and Thais, the whole Janine Toms, all of you. Thank you. It's been, these 3 hours have already been quite glorious and memorable. So I appreciate it. How many people in this room have read this book? How many people know? Thank you. 2 hands. How many of you know what this book is about? Okay, good. All right. So in this novel, that yes, Lawrence Fishburne is going to turn into a movie, which should be really interesting on screen. Every white person in America walks into the nearest body of water and drowns overnight. And it leaves the country to people of color to try to reimagine, to pull back together, to try to find a version of themselves that perhaps they lost and re-Americanize America. And it's been an interesting exploration to write it, but even more so to have the conversations thereafter. And I've had these conversations all over the world now. It's been very different to talk to Americans, particularly Black Americans. And I live in London, so I have a lot in London. I've had them in different countries. And what I've enjoyed, we talked about this a bit briefly today, I've enjoyed being able to engage in a much larger diasporic conversation about the global Blackness. What does that mean, opposed to the individualization of it, to say, I'm a Black American, or I'm a Caribbean, or I'm a New Yorker, right? Like, it's all a bit different, but ultimately there's a sense, and I think a need, if not a demand, to arrive to a shared sense of values globally. So when we're at the table, we're all speaking from the same voice. And I've been privileged to be a part of some of those conversations, because in this book, all the white people die. So without further ado, I'm going to read to you guys from this book. And I always struggle with where to read. Sometimes I want to read from the ending, but then the ending is a twist and I don't want to give it away. And then sometimes I want to read from the middle, but everybody hates Sydney as a character, and so people want to fight me. So I'm just going to read from the beginning. And I'm going to read a little bit longer, and excuse me, my voice. I've been under the weather. I have babies, so it's like I'm just sick every day. Thank you. They're twins, so I'm getting double time. And so I'm going to read from the beginning. I'll read a little bit longer than I normally do, and then let's get into it. Let's talk about it. Yeah. And you guys can hear me okay, yeah? Okay, great. Amazing. They killed themselves, all of them, all at once. We unsealed the jails first. Folks showed up swinging bolt cutters to liberate their lawless relatives into a world different from the society out of which they were exiled, because no one stood guard anymore. No longer could anyone be exiled from anywhere. All the banks closed down. Their silent, towering buildings became mausoleums, having been worshipped long enough. Time slowed down too. It sauntered like hours did in Chattanooga and Charleston and Savannah, a notoriously Southern phenomenon now spread like honey over everything. You asked the time and folks just looked up at the sky, mumbling a quarter till, because gone was the appraiser of hours into wages. Gone was the gaze evaluating for its resource every minute ticking inside a body. They killed themselves, all of them, all at once. You could feel their absence in everything. On the subway, in the streets, in all the places the wild reclaimed, where sunflowers grew through office buildings, over golf greens plagued red with ant mounds, where the earth crawled black up the sides of monuments, where all those chihuahuas and cocker spaniels scavenged and begged in packs, their dog sweaters ragged, their bedazzled collars dulled of sparkle. They killed themselves. One morning, every white person in America walked into the nearest body of water and drowned. Even now, on nearly every shore from Southern Gulf to Northern Sound, crosses stand like the skeletons of those old beach crowds. Water rushed and waved, lapped and babbled, unwilling to respect in silence what was otherwise a graveyard. No one expected the event. No one was prepared. Some people were angry, cursing God for doing the business of God. Some were quietly contented, seeing the horror as penance. Some longed for the world before, settling into movie theaters to watch Ferris Bueller's Day Off and Titanic, sharing in the awe of misshapen memories. Howbeit that we remain breathing on this earth at all after such a thing terrorized the conscience. Shame, tortuously complex. Mornings came like a curse to be among those still waking up, even if rising to easy sunshine warm on the skin. Some nights were worse than others, some mornings better. A year later, Charlie couldn't say which emotion grabbed a hold of him the morning he swiftly and finally pulled down all their photos. He found himself a nice house in the suburbs, 2 stories tall with fat white columns and a skirt of porches. His front yard sparkled green except under the shadow of an oak tree where innocently a tire swing bolted to its arm whined on every breeze. His home, of course, added to the sum of thousands taken over as we hollowed out city tenements, spilling into the outlying neighborhoods of Germantown, Rockville, and Bethesda. To hear Al Green's voice drifting over an above-ground pool wasn't uncommon anymore. Charlie, and he suspected many others, tried to keep the photos and the memorabilia from the families who once owned the houses. For his part, and for months stacked on months, Charlie kept the birthday cards and the perfume bottles, the jewelry and the golf clubs. He left portraits hung up on the walls and the photo booth strips magnetized to refrigerators as a monument to their lives, hoping the solemn act might absolve him somehow. Maybe looking at all those blue and green eyes every day, those easy, easy smiles, might make him feel things he didn't. But Charlie still felt what he always felt. A husband in a suit, a blonde wife, 2 children, and a yellow dog. Charlie did not want to know their names nor what became of their dog. When he finally took down their pictures, he did not cry. Wedged in a box, packed into the garage, Charlie put away every article in the house that made him feel as he did before all the oceans went from waving to wailing. Photos, of course, stuffed animals, and unopened mail. He unstuck the souvenir magnets from the fridge, making caricatures of Paris, London, and Rome. Even the small library of self-help books and sci-fi books, which for him held together a watchful consciousness, he stowed deep in boxes. Anything that hovered and pulsed like memory got set aside, and when at last the house sat empty of character, quiet but for the crickets playing symphonies outside, Charlie could nearly convince himself that he deserved that which he never could quite bring himself to accept. Charlie had class that morning. The day would result in his 3rd teaching lesson ever, and he wasn't awful at educating. His students eagerly arrived to his classroom and departed energized. Moreover, he did believe his lessons were deeply important offerings to this new world. The problem was, a year ago, the only books he read came from the prison library. Indeed, in his mind, under the cardigan and argyle socks, down naked as a hound puppy, he still wore prison's uniform. Couldn't shake it. The result, one so oddly unexpected, came when he looked around, bewildered at the big house and the green lawn, and forward to all those students, delirious to absorb all that he had to teach. Him, of all the good folks still living, one day he withered away in a cell, and the next he waltzed into a world without white people, from prisoner to professor, bewildered and bewildered. All right, I'll stop there. Thank you. Thank you. That opening chapter was really that was actually the first thing I wrote, and to start this conversation, I'll tell you a bit of a story. So I wrote that initial chapter with Charlie, and I was like, I think I got something. I was really excited about it. And whenever I get excited, I'll give it to my wife, and then she'll tell me if it's worth being excited about or not. And I took it to her, and her reaction, it struck me so profoundly, because she read it and she was like, it's really good, but this isn't my experience. And now my wife is biracial. Some of you have met my wife. She's like 2 feet taller than me and wonderful and sweet, but she instantly regarded this book as something that was completely different from her way of life. She grew up in East London or West London. She grew up in Ealing, and she was the only black kid in her class, but she didn't associate herself with being black. She just was biracial. And her experience growing up in high school, she told me stories about how she couldn't figure out how to curl her own hair until she was 16 or 17. And if you are a black person, you know, if you cannot do your hair in high school, it is a wreck on your identity, because you don't know who you are. No one else knows who you are. And she couldn't figure those things out. And she said, when she read Charlie, she said that, you know, that experience, while it may be true for me, isn't true for her. So how can she determine if she's black or not? And that's how I ended up writing the second chapter, which is Sydney. And I wanted to create space for my wife and my kids to be able to find themselves in the pages. And then that became sort of expanded. And it was like, how do we include as many experiences as we can in the pages so that people can feel themselves and find themselves, or find a contrast? And so it began there. She didn't like the book until the second chapter. It worked out. So with that said, I want to answer anybody's questions that you guys have. As I said, this book was a tricky thing to write, terrifying to say the least. And I wrote it during the election year.
Which election?
So the Biden one. And it was my when I was publishing it, Simon & Schuster, they were very afraid for me. And they were like, should we wait 2 years? Should we wait a year? And the challenge was to be confrontational as much as possible. And so I wrote it. And then the second stop on my tour was DC, because I was like, let's get into it. And so it was hard to write, but it's even harder to have all the open conversations and sit at the center of it. So I'll open the floor to you guys if you have any questions. Yes. Sorry, I'll come right to you. Also, tell me your name, because I want to know who you are.
Nice to meet you. My name is Eddie, and I haven't read the book.
Hey, Eddie.
I understand the plot only from synopsis, but the first thing that strikes me from your reading, I don't know if it's a combination of the text or how you're reading it, but just remarkably poetic in rhythm.
It's very kind.
It's very beautiful.
Thank you.
The first thing that comes to mind, my top question to ask you would be, why did you feel a need or desire to create a black-only space to explore the ideas you wanted to? Only because from my perspective, it would seem to maybe strike some friction against some of the goals that just the diversity kind of aspires towards. So why did you make that decision?
It's a good question, Eddie. So I'll tell you from the beginning. I was some of the people have heard this story before, but the beginning of the book, its inception point, came when I was watching Ferris Bueller's Day Off. You've seen this movie? Famous John Hughes movie, one of my favorites. I was living in New York, and I'm Floridian, so I don't do cold. and I was in New York and it was cold and I was struggling because my car kept getting towed. It was just a mess. And whenever I feel that way, I watch 80s and 90s movies, and I'm watching this John Hughes movie, Ferris Bueller, and watching this kid who I've watched since I was, I've been watching this movie since I was young, and his mischief, his ability to, skip school, get his friends to skip school, his audacity to look right at the camera when he's talking to you. He, changes his grades. He steals that Porsche, right? He, impersonates a cop. He changes all this stuff, and then he's singing Don Quixote in a parade. And the whole time we're rooting for him. As I'm watching this, I just suddenly have this thought, and the thought, it came out of nowhere, and the thought was, if I were to take Ferris Bueller out of this movie and replace him with Trayvon Martin, what would happen in this film? And it shocked me. It shuddered through me because every single person here knows that movie would not work. But we don't ask ourselves why it won't work. And so when I had this thought, again, I'm just sitting in my house, my little flat in Brooklyn, and I thought, I'm going to write the Black Ferris Bueller. So I sat down and I was like, okay, audacious black kid who's definitely going to steal a Porsche, and we're going to root for him. And as I start to write him, and I sort of created what I thought was an audacious enough character, when I applied the rules of the world as I understood those rules, the character and the story fell apart. And so I tried again. I was like, okay, I'm going to write a story about a black woman that's living in the mountains somewhere, and maybe she's fighting a mountain lion, something crazy, something Western. Again, apply the rules of the world, and it started to fall apart. And I struggled with it, and I went to bed that night really like taxed because I thought something was wrong with me. I was like, why can't I imagine these characters in this reality? And that morning I got up, I walked to my favorite coffee shop. It was a coffee shop called Zelda in Brooklyn. I sit down and I look around and I thought, what would happen in this space that I come to every day if there were no white people in it? And the first thought was, it was just me and this other black guy. And between the two of us, neither one of us knew how to make coffee. So we wouldn't be drinking. That was first and foremost. But then I started to ask about like the furniture, like who's sourcing this material? Where is it coming from? Who's building it? I started to ask myself about the coffee beans themselves. Who's sourcing them? Who's flying in a plane? Who owns the plane? Who owns the jet fuel to put in the plane? And the further I went up the cone of question, the fewer of us there were. And it became less of an ask about the physical space in which we occupy, but the peripheral spaces that we don't even think about, that we don't occupy at all. And if this world, if we intend to make a world that is indeed not just diverse, but inclusive, and this is important, the variation, we sometimes couple those words together and we say, diversity and inclusion. But it's one thing to be diverse, it's another thing to be included. And to be included in the space is to be able to arrive to the table fully formed, not partially formed. And I don't have the answer, but I did have the question. And speculative fiction is all about the question, to say, I've got this idea in my mind and this question I can't answer, and I'm going to write it into this book and see if I can superimpose that question on everybody else's reality. So when they leave and they look around and they go, what would this space look like? What does inclusion look like when you start to widen what the space is? And so I wanted to elevate the conversation. It cannot be about, simply putting, a black mermaid on TV, right? It has to be more expansive than that. We have to be thinking about the totality of the space. And there's so much that I don't know, so much that I wish I knew, but I don't have the opportunity to be exposed to that knowledge. And so the book was designed, if anything else, to create a sort of a kick in the butt for everybody to go, pick your head up. You're looking down and you're wondering about the crumbs when we're not looking at the cake. And so it wasn't exclusively about blackness, but the inclusivity of everybody. And it cannot be considered inclusive unless black people arrive to it fully formed. Yes, I've got you. Don't worry, I got you. Yes, ma'am. Hello. What's your name?
I'm Sumaya from Belgium.
Hello.
I did not know you worked for Kami, so I Googled.
Please tell me you didn't go to Goodreads, because that's like, you didn't go to Goodreads or anything, did you? Okay, good.
I think AI was feeding me.
AI loves me, so.
This is an interesting discussion, and I have been for years now struggling with some fundamental questions that could perhaps be challenging what you were just saying. And let me make sense of my thoughts. Belgium, we have a history, which you
I'm familiar.
know.
I'm familiar.
Excuse me? And so we're dealing with some issues, just like you guys in UK and the States. But I have fundamental problems with how the different communities are dealing with these issues. What I mean by that is that I'm sort of rejecting since a couple of years the notion of diversity and equity and inclusion, because it makes me think of what Toni Morrison said about racism and discrimination being there to distract us. It's distracting us. And I can only speak for Belgium, but I think we can also extrapolate to other countries in Europe. We have extremely bright people dedicating their lives to diversity projects, to creating safe spaces, to identity politics, to figuring out who they are and the roots, etc. While doing that, people are preparing to go to the moon, which means that, again, they are missing the train, because you're occupied with creating space where you think you feel safe. And this creates a society of two speeds. One where, just like you said, you gave, actually the metaphor was really compelling, was beautiful. When you said about who is fueling the planes to go and get the stuff needed to, etc. And we cannot afford to be stuck in that seeking safe space for decades to come, because the earth is burning, and it is those very people who created structures of inequality that led to that burning planet that are now designing the solutions. And what are we doing? We're still talking about safe spaces. And it's something that it's friction inside of me. I completely acknowledge the need of what we're doing, and at the same time, I do not do that. In Belgium, I'm a scientist, by the way. I'm a writer, I'm a scientist. I do not engage with these discussions in Belgium. As soon as a journalist wants to put me in that corner, I'm like, come again? And I make sure that the discussion goes back to what I am working on, being demography and political ecology and climate governance, etc. And my question to you is, when will it be enough?
I think this is valid. We have to be able to walk and chew gum at the same time. We have to the walking and chewing gum at the same time. Yeah. This is what everything that you've said. I experienced a similar conflict, but it is less about it is about how I imagine the future and what space I have in my mind today to imagine tomorrow. Now, I want you to imagine that that you live life without any struggle at all. So you wake up in the morning, you don't have bills that you have to pay, you don't have trauma that you're trying to overcome. You have all the food and everything that you need. You're in a state of abundance. In that state of abundance, your survival is not drawing your attention. Trying to find your place in the world isn't drawing your attention. You start to look up and you imagine things like mapping the stars, and you start to develop richer sciences. You start to understand the human body, your science, your art, your culture, your spirituality. All those things deepen. It's difficult to do that if you don't have the space in your brain can't afford the space to give it. I think one is in service to the other. And I don't think it's about one arriving to its conclusion. It's about one becoming a platform of propulsion towards the other. Does that make sense? And so when I think of safe spaces, I don't think of them as static. I think of them as a platform upon which we build everything else. But we cannot build everything else unless you have the space to imagine it. And this is the great difficulty. We are right now today living in someone else's imagination. Every one of us, we're living in someone else's imagination. You go to work because someone imagined you going to work to service them. And so if you have, as a scientist, I sort of boomerang this question back to you because when you imagine the future, what do you see? You, as a person who has the wherewithal, intelligence, you have the space, and hopefully you have the you've seems as if you've arrived to a self worth, self knowledge enough to go. I have what I need to move forward. I don't have to stay in the space of sort of repairing myself. When you move forward, what are you imagining? What do you see? And if what you see is all of us going forward, opposed to one of us, this is what I mean. Because when I talk about, I have my business partner, he says the most absurd things. He used to be a big fan of Elon until like 2 weeks ago. And he used to say things like, I want to colonize the moon. And I'm like, dude, like, take it easy. No one's colonizing anything, definitely not the moon. But it's an individual aspiration. It's not a collective one. And when I imagine the future, and I've sought my whole life, I've sit and love science fiction. I like to sit and watch, like the first time I ever watched my Mad Max, I remember watching it and being like, wait a minute, the world has come to an end. The canopy of is broken and people, the sun is pouring in and people getting whiter. What happened to the people of color? Like, I don't understand what's going on. Confused me. But then I went and watched like Star Trek, and I'm like, oh, wait a minute. They are pioneering, but not to colonize. They're pioneering to understand. There's a progression that is a very different way of living. Who's imagining that? And so I ask you, what is the future that you're imagining? Because it isn't about stasis. It isn't about healing just for healing's sake. It's about healing so that we have the space to imagine. And then when you imagine, you have the wherewithal to go and achieve. It is the action towards our aspirations that matter. And so I sit here in these rooms like this, and I go, I want to create that space where people can feel safe enough to speak, but that they can also imagine. This whole book is designed to do that. When you sit back and you read it, people get mad at me because they don't like the ending, but the ending was designed to make people go, well, what happens next? You tell me. You go tell me. How do you want this world to be if you have carte blanche? And it seems as if you're at that place, which I'm happy that you feel like I feel like I've arrived to at least a safe enough place where I can go and try to build a future, bring everybody along with you towards the future that you imagine. Yeah. Yes, I've got you. I've got you.
Paloma. I'm
Hello,
from
Paloma.
London as well.
Hello,
actually,
Paloma.
I've been in Marrakesh now almost 9
Wait, which
years.
part of London?
I'm from southeast London, the better part.
All right, respect.
There's an ongoing rivalry between southeast London and the rest of London.
I don't even think there's trains to go there, but it's fine. It's fine. It's good.
So when you were reading the first chapter, I was thinking what you said your wife thought, which is kind of like, this isn't my experience. You know, I think I probably had a similar experience to your wife as someone who's from heritage, and I was like the only brown person in my school, and there's things that as an adult I look back on my experiences and I'm like, that was really racist. And these teachers were saying and doing these things that they should not be saying and doing. And then when I had my own children, this is my oldest son that's with me now.
What's his name?
Winter.
Look at that
He was
great
born
name.
on a snowy day at 20. He was very premature. He wanted him from a strong age.
Welcome, Winter.
Thank you. But his experience as someone who's black heritage is he's quite assumed. And then once people realise I am mum, I'm not the nanny, I'm not some other kind of caregiver, the switch up is really, really interesting from predominantly white people. He goes from being this cute, lovable boy to, oh, watch out for him. Oh, he's a troublemaker. Even at the age of 3, being compared to an animal whilst we were at the farm for a visit.
Jeez.
And so, I guess my question to you is, I need to read chapter 2, but how do you see this book fitting in with the black experience, especially with what is going on now in the US and the UK with Trump and reform and all of these things that are going on? And is there also space for people like my children who clearly wear our heritage on our skin. So.
Damn, I'm sorry that happened to you. That's tough. Let me ask you this: what do you think black is?
I honestly, for me, I don't know. I think it's different, like in the US, like the US experience compared to the UK. And I think in the UK, we have more of a class system. So even for me, you can probably tell from the way that I speak, I was brought up in predominantly white. I was privately educated. And so when I went to university and I interacted with Black British people for the first time, I was not a good friend. I didn't know how to interact with people. I was saying the wrong things, trying to be like, I understand you, I can relate, and I was just like not allowed, like not invited back to class anymore. And so I think that I don't know, I cannot honestly say what is the Black experience other than how, from my own experience, and that is being Black is what white people put onto me. It's not how I live my life. It's not my experience. It's not me as a person or my character. It is how other people interact with me based on their assumptions and their opinion of me for the color of my skin. That has been my experience as somebody who's dual heritage.
Thank you. No, thank you for sharing that, because my wife went through something similar. She posed that question to me. She's like, "What even is black?" And I really had to think about it, because I'm like, well, as a Southern, I've come from the South in America, so it's like they're very particular about what black is. You know what I'm talking about? Very particular about what black is. And then you go different parts of the country, very particular. And when I started to travel the world, and I used to live in the Philippines, and it was fascinating how they saw blackness. It's fascinating when I went to Singapore, go to Cambodia. It's a very different thing. And what I came to realize is there's two sides of it. One side is what you said. It is a contrast upon which we are projected, which is to say you got this whiteness and then you're projected upon that contrast. And it orients itself to your identity as a way to frame you. The flip side of it is, I think black is an inclusivity. It's all of the different people from all these different places. By being othered, you are now being unothered because you're together. And I experienced this with my wife, because I said to her, I was like, well, asked her some questions, what do you think blackness is? And she was like, well, I'm mixed heritage. I got this, I got this. And I go, well, what's the part of you that when you say I'm mixed heritage, what's the black heritage? And she goes, I'm from, the islands. I'm from, I'm an islander. And I'm like, but what does that mean? Have you been? Do you have a cultural connection to it? And she said, no, she'd never been. And I asked her why, and she told me she didn't know. And I think that's the contrast, where the contrast tells you you can't know who you are. And we experience this as Black Americans. I didn't find out, this, Fahamu, I didn't find out until, I think it was maybe 4 months ago, my origin. I didn't know that my family was Cameroonian. I didn't know anything about my family. And literally not another person in my family knows anything about my family. It ends. And there's a cutoff from that inclusivity. And so what I tell people all the time is explore overcoming the wall that separates you from that point of origin. And you'll find that it is a doorway into an inclusivity that is enormous. It is an enormity in which we are all included. And it's a shared experience. It's a shareable experience. It's something that I think enriches us as individuals. But then once you are enriched by it, it allows you to arrive back to the global stage fully formed. And you don't, not unlike what she said, you don't arrive feeling divided in yourself. You don't arrive feeling unsure or uncertain, and in so doing, allowing someone to fill up the vessel of who you are with who they want you to be. You must arrive fully formed. And I think a part of that is the exploration of it. So when you say I'm multiracial, what is the Black heritage from which you arrive? Jamaican.
My mom's side is German, and so I've had this concept because I can trace my Jamaican side back to my grandparents, but my German side, we have a family Bible that goes back 16 generations.
That's insane.
So it's just like, it is a complete contrast with both sides of my family. I went to Jamaica when food. That's my link.
Right, it's good though, right? It's good. My wife is the same. She's never been to Trinidad before ever. Her mother left Trinidad when she was, I think, 8. Never's gone back either. And so I encourage us to explore the point of origin of whatever it is, because it's hard to go what is black if you never even wandered through those woods and try to figure it out. And then you have something to bequeath. I give it to my kids. This is my experience as a living person on this earth. This is your grandmother's experience. This is her grandmother's experience. This is where we come from. This is what the air smells like. This is what the food is. And that's an important, I think, mechanism for them to not just orient to a sense of self, but figure out what elements they bring into the future we want to create. It's interesting doing the film for this book right now. So I'm writing the film for it. And in the writing of the film for it, there's all these questions about how are you going to stand this up and make it 3-dimensional? How are you going to make this world? And have all these questions about, okay, if what parts of the Black American experience are going to be a part of Alabama? What part of the Caribbean experience are going to be a part of Alabama? What part of the sort of indigenous and Mexican? Like, I'm asking all these questions because it is so expansive and it's inclusive, a cultural inclusion. But it starts with us. We have to go back, Sankofa, as they say. You have to return to that point of origin and bring it forward, which means go explore it. Go explore Jamaica. I know about the Windrush in London, and I know that it was intentional to create this division between that point of origin. And so I say, yes. In this book, everyone's included. I mean, not to give away the ending, read the book, but like there's a whole parade at the end of the book where everyone's included. And so to me, it was important to create enough space where people can, even if they don't like all the characters, they can find themselves in them. And it opens up the gateway for us to be included. Of course. Yes.
I don't know if you know this, but 30-40 minutes walk from here, there was a slave market until the early 1900s.
Wow.
In Marrakesh, it was called Marché des Esclaves in French. It started in the year 1100 or something, close to that.
Wait, from 1100 to 1900?
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
Now the interesting thing is, I say that, and obviously your assumption is it's the caravans and it's black, but there was actually a very significant portion of Europeans slaves in that market.
Right? Slaves.
Yes. Yes. There was a slave market, buying them. And I give you one more element of trivia is in today's money, the range at which the slaves were bought and sold, whether they were European or African origin, and when they came from Africa, they were generally from what is today Mali, Senegal, Niger. The prices were, in today's money, somewhere between, I would say, $20,000 to up to $100,000. Only the top 0.1% of the wealthiest people could afford the merchants. Obviously, the Sultan had an army of slaves himself. And there's a lot of documentation about that. The interesting thing, and that's not the question, I'll ask you the question, but the interesting thing is that in today's world, a slave in Southeast Asia or in parts of Africa, Nigeria, whatever, the market is around $100 to $500. You buy a slave for agriculture, fishing, Chinese, those Russian, Chinese mafia do that. Nigeria also is very involved in this. You can actually get a person by paying that kind of money for sex, for fishing, for agriculture. That's the current marketplace, right? And so it's interesting to think about slavery back in the days as being awful, etc. But it was on the back of wars, and these people were traded. But it kind of is fascinating to see the difference in value, in today's world where human rights have come forward, and we're all talking about how much progress we need. My question to you is regarding healing, right? I am curious to know what the healing process should be when you investigate and you know more and more about your ancestry, and you know more and more about the legacy and the baggage and the hurt and the trauma. Is it partly forgiving? Is it partly processing? Is it, you know, I just don't know whether it's a mixture of those things. How do you move? Because I feel like at some points you have to come to peace with the memory and the stories, etc., in order to move. Because nobody filled with anger or hatred can actually get anywhere, in my opinion. So that's the question. The healing.
You give me the easy ones. I see. I like it. I don't know the answer to this, but I will sort of reframe it a little bit, because there's two sides of healing. There is the healing of those who have been oppressed and experienced trauma, and then there's the healing of those who created the trauma. And oftentimes we look at we put the pressure upon those who have been oppressed to arrive to some sort of reconciliation, whether it be internal or apologetic. And you go, I want you to get over it. And I often sit on the other side of it and look and think, at what point does someone who is willing to engage in that type of behavior arrive to some sort of healing within themselves? Because I think we in this room, maybe we do, but I can't imagine that we all engage in, violent behavior without any sort of conscience or association to conscience. Or maybe we apply our conscience to some sort of reasoning, be it monetary, capitalistic reasoning, whatever it may be. You go, well, I can afford this person, so I'm going to buy this person, and I'm going to use this person like I would use a tool. There's a moment at which that the morality has to overcome the reason. And when that happens, whose job is it to feel reconciled? Is it the person who's been abused, or is it the abuser? And I think it needs to be both. Ultimately, in America, I experience this every day. I mean, more now with Trump in office than in my lifetime. It's been worse, so I don't want to. People often talk about the world that we're in right now, and trust me, it was a lot worse. It's still terrible, but it's a lot worse. But I hear these conversations, and people will come to me and they're like, well, why don't, slavery happened X amount of years ago, and Jim Crow happened X amount of years ago. How are you working to get over it? And I go, well, they're still doing it. So it's very difficult to get over something that's still happening, right? And if, just like you said, like people are still being bought and sold, it's very difficult to go, I am going to get over the trauma of that if the trauma is still happening. And so I sort of, it's a difficult thing, because there's this great Muhammad Ali quote. He said, it's like there's 10,000 snakes at my door, and you told me that 2 or 3 of them aren't poisonous, so I should open the door and let them all in. And that's a terrifying proposition when you go, I don't want snakes at my door, man. Like, that's what I don't want, is I want a snake's gone. And so the idea cannot be that the people who have been traumatized must heal in order for us to progress, if those who are doing the traumatizing aren't progressing in equal measure. And so it may translate into, I think we're beyond apologies and things like that. I do think that there is a space in which we can amicably move forward, but I do think that there has to be some sort of considerations for reparations, be those reparations monetary or social. And social meaning, I see oftentimes when I was in Venice recently, all the Africans are treated terribly in Venice. And I'm going, how could you treat these people this way after everything that they've been through? There's a moral cognizance that I don't think has been achieved. And so I think I don't know how to do it, but I know that it cannot be one side or the other. It must be both. It must be both. Yes, bro. I got you.
I'm going to get back to the book, but I think the important part, because that's not what the book is about at all. But I think that's what it evokes for people who are consciously afraid of imagining a world where Black Americans have the ability to be their full selves with the absence of whiteness. And I think that scares some people because the book has no hate in it. And so back to me thinking about you actually putting this in America, because no matter if there's slavery and one person is buying a slave, which is god awful, our entire country was built. The whole financial system was built on whiteness and capitalism against black bodies, right? That built the country. So I think back to this book, I felt when I read it, the imagination was, what would I be like if I didn't work in corporate America for 30 years in this country that my family built? And I can trace my family back because I took the effort to understand where my family came from for generations and generations, where they landed, if they truly landed, if they've been here already. And I think that's the beauty of the book. It's just the absence of whiteness, the imagination. And what it does is I felt it uplifted children of color just to imagine the world in a very different way. It's just so elevating. So I just want to place that in here because I think we're getting off to it seeming like it's a book of anything more than love and imagination.
I appreciate that. It is. It is love.
Is that really why that you chose the U.S.?
Yeah. I mean, there's a scene. I think it's actually in the movie. I don't think it's in the book, but it's based in the book, but it's in the film, where Charlie is driving and he can see all of America. It's like wide open, and it's the first time that he can look at the sort of expanse, the Americana expanse, and look at it with the romanticism that we look at it when we read a Kerouac novel. You go, look at this beautiful place. Black people don't always look at America like that. Half the time, they take that exit and it's nerve wracking. But there's a scene in which he drives into a grocery store, or sorry, a convenience store, and because there's no white people, it's full. It's like full of stuff, and he can just take whatever he wants. And he goes in, and there's a family inside with him, and there's a mother, a father, and two kids, and they're running up and down the aisles. And the father says, "Only take what you need. You have access to anything you want." And still their answer is only take what you need. And I think that is what this book ultimately is about. Is when we think of, especially as it pertains to reparations, I think a lot of white people in America think that they're afraid of what you're describing because they think black people are going to somehow retaliate. And if they wanted to, they would have already. But that fear, it needs to be reimagined. If you were to say black people can have anything they want, you have to know they're not going to take everything. They're just going to take what they need. They're going to find themselves equalized in the way that they deserve to be. But it's not about, and I think it's relatively unique to Black Americans. In my experience, my travels has been relatively unique to Black Americans. That there's a push, man. There's been a push since the beginning to like find ourselves equal at that table in all ways. And equal seems the goalpost keeps moving on what equality is, and I for one want to imagine a world where that isn't happening, where it's just like, okay, we're all settled, we're all on the same page, we're all trying to achieve the same end, and I was hoping that the book would be that. You could see these little lines. I designed it. I didn't design it, but I had it designed this way because I wanted the book to be the signal that's in the book. So when you read it and you put it down, the wavelength is in your mind. Like, I want to imagine something else. And in order to achieve something else, we must first imagine it. So yeah, it was about the hope that's within that imagination. Because I certainly, if you gave me carte blanche, if somebody came over here and put a crown on my head and it's like, you God now, I wouldn't do anything crazy. I wouldn't be like, I would be like, let's have fun. Let's enjoy it. We'd be at Carnival, right? We'd be having a good time. And so I think that's true for the majority of the people that I know. And that's certainly what lives in the book. Well, let me get him. Let me come right back to you.
I mean, it's kind of a question, but for me, one of the big words is the inversion that happens. And just some of the framing contextually, growing up in the States, my dad grew up in Mississippi and went to segregated high school. So all this history is one generation away. None of this is ancient. You know this every day still. Not to mention what's happening right now. Yes, it was worse then, but it doesn't make it any less worse for listening.
No.
And that inversion, it reminded me, remember Cosmic Slop? The aliens took the black people away, and you almost reversed it, where the aliens took the white
I literally was like, I don't want us to be gone. I don't want us to be gone.
But that's the beauty for me, was a joyful horror film.
Yeah.
Out of something that you see sort of horrific came this beautiful joy and cleansing and awareness and community building. And it also feels like the inverse of the replacement theory. And you started to touch on a lot of it now. That's driving so much of the fear that's really stoking in the world right now. It's just, they'll replace us. You touched on a lot of it, so I don't need to repeat what's going on. But I guess just from that joyful space and from the confident, stick your chest out space that this book brought out to me, like how is that joyful defiance to what's happening right now sort of unfolded in these conversations? What does it mean for Black folks to find that, white folks to be scared by it, the same way we've been scared by so long, not seeing ourselves represented in any of these future things, like, got no Black people. I talk to any Butler, so it's like, it's so inverse to me. It's the inverse of so much, and also the comfort that we all strive for, Garveyism and so many other notions, especially, I'm trying to say a lot in a little, but, being from the States where we had that erasure of the relationship to the continent. So many of us are trying to find our hyphen to another country, which maybe you just found it recently, but a lot of us still have not found that. And if we can, there's a big cultural river that we need to make some menses to. So anyway, without going on too much, just that the joyfulness and different reaction in this moment. I don't know how to put it in this.
No, you nailed it. I'm not. I'm a Scorpio, but I'm not a very emotional Scorpio. I'm not one of those people that cry in the movies. Although I did cry and set it off. I don't know, but I don't typically do that. And this is serious. When I was writing this and I wrote the ending, I was crying, and I'm writing it, and I'm sitting here like bawling out tears on the page, and it was in part because of the joy. I've never experienced it. I've never sought in what it feels like to be culturally enriched fully, and everybody around you to celebrate it all at once. There are glimmers of it, when I go to Mardi Gras, which is why I lived in the book. There are glimmers of it in Carnival. There are glimmers of it at the cookout, but or at just Thanksgiving at my mom's house kind of thing. But it wasn't this collective elevation all at once. And at the end of the book, when Charlie is looking down over everyone and he's at the machine, I was sort of posing this question to myself, and it was like, as you said, the world has been built atop the bodies of people of color, and they've had to lie flat on their back in order to do that. And if they decide to stand up, everything crumbles. And would I be okay with that? And as I'm writing it, I was like, yeah. This ain't mean that I hate anybody. It means that this got to change. It's got to change, because it isn't. I don't think racism is necessarily a vitriolic thing. It's a construction of a reality around us that we are forced to live in. And I'm like, let's break the walls. And I mean that when I said this isn't me talking about insurgents and violence. It's me saying that this system has to change in order for us all to be included in it. It has to. And so when I was writing it, got to the last page, it felt like standing up. It felt like, all right, I'm upright, and we're going to walk into the future. There was one story I'll tell you that was fascinating. I was doing, I went on tour of this book, and the first maybe 6 or 7 stops were all book festivals. So now I'm like in front of a whole bunch of people, terrified, knowing I'm gonna get shot, just knowing I'm gonna get shot. And I go to Texas Book Festival, and I'm with my friend Mateo, and he had written this interesting book called Black Buck. And it's just the two of us. And he told me, he was like, his book had been out for a while, and he's used to crowds. And I walked up to the stage, and he was like, yo, I've never seen this many people before. And I'm like, seriously, this is normal? Full of people. It's probably 250, 300 people on an outdoor tent in Texas. And I'm like, I think they're here to see you. And he goes, dude, they're here to see you, and you might be ready to duck. And I'm like, all right. And so I'm sitting there, we're having this, just like this, having this dialogue. And I don't like, I don't shy away from what I feel. I'll be open, because there's no hate in my heart, so I feel comfortable saying what I say. So at the end, they have all of the mics, they're passing them around, for people to ask the questions. And there's one mic up at the front on a podium, on a stand. And this old white lady stands up, from the back, and she starts to walk down the side. Somebody could have handed her a mic, but for some reason she felt it was very important to walk all the way down. The whole place goes silent. And I'm sitting here like, oh God, this is my nightmare. This is the one. This is the one that's going to do me in. And she walked down. She gets to the microphone, and she takes the mic and she points at me like this. Not Mateo. She points right at me, and she goes, "This book made me angry." And I was like, "Okay, white lady, let's go. Let's do it." And she goes, "I've never read anything that made me feel like the other. And if I've ever made you feel this way or anybody else in this room, I'm mad at myself." And she turned around to the crowd and she goes, "I'm mad at all of y'all." And I was like, this is what I'm talking about. This is overcoming something. And I think overcoming it with love and appreciation. Yes.
Can't help but think that your book echoes in some ways Karen Finney's work. Who was here a few weeks ago. And in the conception of spaces and the intrinsic equation between spaces, whiteness, and ownership. I mean, to me, one thing that seems very obvious is that there is. I mean, I view ownership and the rhetorics, the semantics around ownership as the root of all evils. And I feel like if if you don't own space, you become less of a person. And I feel like if our conception of the world moved away a little bit from ownership, then this idea of being collectively within the same space and equal would be a lot easier.
I think there's important relationship between ownership and occupants, right? To occupy a space but not intend to own it. And I find this true more often than not in the dynamic between men and women, where men tend to try to own spaces that they should merely occupy for a moment and move out of the way. I'm a profound believer in a matriarchal society. And I think when I think of ownership, in particular, in the way you just described it, there is this, a patriarchal society tends to be both owner heavy, and I think, do I need to move? Okay, cool. I think it tends to be owner heavy, but it also tends to drive with leadership, which is to say, the male will walk forward and everyone walks behind, which is ironic because that means your back is to the people you're meant to love and protect. Matriarchal society is about gathering towards a center, and in that center, everyone gets everything they need, right? It is an abundant society versus one that's built on possession. And so I've been sort of living in with this question in my mind, even in my household, and I have 3 daughters, so I'm constantly going, what spaces am I owning and what spaces am I just occupying to make room or to contribute and then step away? And I don't think there's enough of that. I think people are so afraid. This I'm sure is born out of capitalism to some degree, in that we're sort of, by default, you never have enough, and by default, you must own something to have something. But I suspect when I sit back and I imagine the future that I want, ownership isn't really a part of it in that way. It's about roots in the ground that give. Picture this great big tree, and the roots go back to the point of origin. Like, I know everything about who I am, and the tree constantly gives new life, and it constantly gives me everything that I need. And when I imagine that, it is not about ownership. The river does not make you pay for the water. And so I think I do see that as the not just futuristic is what I mean, which is to say it's advanced. That's not an old way of thinking. It's not any less futuristic than thinking about, spaceships. It's like, if you had carte blanche to go, I can make anything I want. I wouldn't make that. I wouldn't make a spaceship. Like, I just wouldn't. Right. I don't know why. I don't know. I mean, maybe to, like, if there's some good rocks. I don't know. Like, I just wouldn't. My aspiration would be to make sure everyone had everything they need. And my aspiration would be to never have to worry about shelter, never have to worry about, having shoes, never have to worry about feeling like I don't have enough, which I think is a prerequisite to both violent stealing and ownership in that way. So that is the future, I think. Yes.
Just to the point someone further up made earlier
Yeah,
about healing.
Yeah.
It seems to me as if the conversation and the ideas you were just working with seem quite connected to healing, and ironically don't really have to do with race in the sense of like providing communities with what they need.
Yeah.
And like hoping and imagining for new structures, funding structures like financially, so people have what they need. Maybe even if they don't own the space or have a stake in the space, they can still take from the space what they need to live a fulfilling life. I mean, I lived in America for quite a few years, and even though I'm from Britain, I've just never encountered anywhere that seems so harsh towards those that are in need of the most.
Yeah.
Particularly when it comes to medicine.
Yeah.
Also education.
Goodness gracious, man.
In terms of like healing.
Yeah.
It seems to me like maybe one avenue is to materialize those kind of structures where people in need have access to education and health and healthcare and
yeah, definitely 100%. I mean, there's to your first point about race, I do think that in the future race is replaced with culture in a very clear way, which is to say we are not orienting ourselves to skin color, we're orienting ourselves to a sort of port of origin and awareness of that point of origin and its connection to everywhere else. It's not lost on me that Nigerians act almost the exact same as Mexicans, like it's like they're brothers. And so there's a cultural relationship, I think is true, but cultural exchange is a part of that, where you are giving something and you're taking something away, but it's as much contribution as it is claim, right? And so, yes, I agree. I can tell you this as an American who moved from America to England. One of my greatest experiences of my life was going to the doctor. Oh my God, it was crazy. I was like, I got sick, and my wife goes, the first thing she said was, she goes, just go to the pharmacy. And I was like, you mean like the CVS? Like, what are they going to do? They don't do anything at the CVS. And she's like, go to the pharmacy. The doctor will see you at the pharmacy. That is not a thing that happens in America. You go to the pharmacy as a 16-year-old kid that's behind the register that does not want to talk to you, and they're not giving you anything. You are terrified to go to the doctor because A, it may be wrong, and B, you're going to be charged so much money. You're going to be charged for things that don't even make sense. That means that the uphill battle towards healing is a monetary one. It means that you must have enough equity and ownership in order to achieve the stasis of health, the basis of health. And so, yeah, which is interesting when you think of it relative to your question, because you were talking of sort of the psychographic of healing, the sort of psychosis that we must overcome. And you're talking about the physical body, but the two are both bound by the same constraints of our reality, which is to say we don't have space to do either one of them. And we must make that space. We must claim that space. And I think it begins with conversations like these. You know, we can sit in this room, feel like we can engage in something that's complex. And we shouldn't shy away from complex. We shouldn't allow space for complexity. But ultimately, the goal is that we can share in this conversation. We can go out and we can start to build the future that we want. Yes, winter.
So why did you decide to include the sky in your event?
This is a great question. So it started long before this book was written. Long before. I was with some friends. We're going out to the beach where I lived. And all of my friends just this is true, they were all from Wisconsin, which is where the book is set in some places. And I go into the store to just grab a couple of things, and I get profiled while I'm in the store. I get pulled aside. They think I've stolen something. They take me into the back room, the whole thing. They're like, we're searching. And I'm like, dude, I'm in swimming trunks. Like, I don't know there's not a hoagie in here, you know? And so they profile me, and I'm like, they eventually let me go. I go outside, and all my friends were outside waiting on me to come back out. And they're like, what, what's going on? And I explained to them. And all my friends were white, and I was like, this kind of thing happens all the time. It's crazy what happens just being black in these places. And I'll never forget, one of the girls, she said, could you just be making that up? I was like, making what up? And she goes, I feel like a lot of Black people, you say these types of things happen, and maybe you've heard it, and so you don't recognize when they're just checking to see if you've stolen something, and maybe it's not race. And I said, it's like I'm trying to tell you that the sky is full of elephants, and I can see the elephants and you can't. That's how it started. And I said that, and it lived in my mind, but it wasn't the title of this book. As I start to write the book, I didn't have a title initially, and I'm writing it. And sometimes when you're writing, you have an outline, you know what you're writing, you're clear on it. And then other times it feels like you're just driving in the dark and you've got a spotlight and things just appear and you're just going with whatever's happening, just documenting it. And I'm writing some dialogue, and I'm just writing it like I'm not really thinking. And he says, it's like it's a sky full of elephants, the character does. And when he said it, I had all these images that were conjured. I could see the elephants, and it reminded me of the continent. I could see the enormity, the scale of it, the density of it, that weight of it, the memory, all of it at once. And it was like, oh, this is I think this is the title. And I started to say it out loud. It's a sky full of elephants, sky full of elephants. And it just felt like it connected to something that was much more meaningful to me. And then when I started to give the book to people with the title on it, they would go, oh, I can see it's the continent, it's the elephant in the room. And it became all these other things, which felt, when that happens, it's not me, it's something else. I got the antenna up and they're just speaking through. So that's where it came from. It came from a racist moment that became a very powerful one. But yeah, thanks for asking. Yes, I've got you. Yes.
I didn't have the chance to read the book yet. Mm-hmm. I wanted to, so we're waiting for you.
I hope I'm not giving away the ending for you.
I can't wait to do it. I read the detailed summary online, and the book's title appears multiple times in her story, which is wonderful. And it reminded me of the concept of Carl Jung, the concept of the shadows. And it felt like the elephants are the shadows that we decide to acknowledge our individual shadows and proceed with our individual being. It would be easier to create collective healing. So in regard to reach the collective healings and to try to digest and clear the wounds of Black communities, Arab communities, Muslims, Jews, different groups that went and lived deep traumas that pass from generation to generation.
Yes.
Each one of us just sits and acknowledge their own shadows, which is also the unconscious. And the ladies from Belgium, you were talking about being in action. I think that if we do not address our unconscious, and if we don't acknowledge our elephants, each one of us, personally, at an individual level, we can be acting, but are we acting with light? Because if we don't bring light to our own dark spaces, then yes, we'll be reacting, but comme une voiture sans, like in a way that you are not exactly owning. So to be rooted in lack, in wounds. I think that was beautiful. The elephants have so many metaphorical symbolism that I found very poetic and beautiful.
Thank you. I can't wait for you to read this, because you just hit on the collective is ultimately what it's about. And there's one of my favorite lines in the whole book. It says, we are alone and together like the molecules of a mountain. And I really like this because when I picture all of us, it's, we are our own gyrating individuals, but we are bound together, and when we're bound together, that's when we're powerful. That's when we tower over all things. And I think part of what feels like a heaviness is the separation, and it's the thing that weighs us and divides us. And I do think individually, yes, we must acknowledge our history, we must acknowledge the trauma in order to arrive to the light. But part of that arrival is the acknowledgement that the light is already there, and it has been all along. Just reconnecting with it, and in so doing, you reconnect with everyone else. Yeah, you'll see it when you read this book. You'll be like, "That was it. It was exactly what he's talking about." Oh, I got you. I got you.
Yeah, well, you've been talking about parenting. I have to say the first quote that I sent from the book to my kids was about Sailor talking to Charlie about parenting.
Oh my gosh, I get that quote all the time.
That was one of the first quotes. I sent them a bunch of other quotes to the extent they probably don't need to go through most of it. But I just wondered if you could speak a little bit about that, because I think what you just said about parenting, it was really, I didn't know you, and I didn't know if you had kids, and I was like, oh, that's really interesting. Is he a parent? And I think that the question I had about that, both from what you've said about what your style of parenting is right now, and what Sailor says to Charlie is, what is that style of parenting that you envision to be able to support that systems change or that transformation that needs to come about?
I love
that's
this
a
question.
challenging one, right?
Is it? Yeah.
The challenging one I think we all face with kids is like, well, this is the world that we're living in.
Yeah.
How could you parent in a way that works to transform things that you're not happy, or that at least exposes them to your own thinking about transformation?
I love this question. And it's a complicated one, because I think everything that I believe is the right thing, often in action, I'm like, what the hell was that? Like, I don't know what just happened. And so my wife is a much better parent between the two of us. But what we often talk about, which is how this sort of language with Sailor came about, is she talks about making space for them to become. And I have, for those of you who know, I have twin toddlers, and then I have a teenage daughter. Teenager going to college, toddlers burning my house down. Okay, and there's an interesting sort of dynamic between the toddler and the teen, in that they both are like identical. Like, they both just want to like destroy, but the parenting of them is really interesting. When my daughter was she was 14, she came to me and she said, "Dad, I think I'm a boy." And I was like, did someone tell you that? Is this like a Santa thing? Like, or how do you know? And she's like, "I think I'm a boy, and I want you to address me as boy from here on out." She was 14 years old. She said this to me. And my first reaction was not an instinctive one. It's like a societal one. It was like, I felt like I just wanted to protect her from going out in the world and having people react to her, to how she felt, how they felt at the time. And my wife, she was the one that said, it's not about deciding for them. It's about allowing space for them to decide for themselves. And you protect the space, you don't protect them. And that's a terrifying proposition. It's a terrifying proposition. It goes against everything that I think of as the right thing to do. And so we did. And she changed her name. And then when she turned 16, she was like, "I think I'm a girl." And I was like, "Okay, do you want to change your name back?" She's like, "Nope." And so, but I didn't infringe upon that space unless she called for me to. I just tried to protect it. And that is, I find it it feels antithetical to what it means to protect someone, to let them go be. And so when I was writing Sailor and Zoo's relationship, I struggled with it because there were things that I knew he was saying that I didn't know if I could do. Right? He said, one of the lines was, he said, "I tell Zoo, go on and be. And I was like, gosh, can I do that? Can I write him in such a way? And so what I tried to do is create a multitude of family dynamics in the story that we can use to triangulate. And so you have Charlie, and this is deeply estranged relationship with his daughter, both trying to arrive to a sense of value and identity in the world. You've got Sailor and Zoo, this like contrast, and somehow they've figured it out, and they're living this beautifully sort of parallel life and respect and honor for one another. And then when you get to Mobile, you've got the sort of version of the nuclear family with the king and the queen and their four kids. And they all are different and all are unique, but they're all marching towards trying to be better people. And there's a line in the book where he says, better is a direction. And that's kind of how I treat parenting. My wife has stacks of books, and I'm just like, let's go throw the football. Like I read enough. I can't read anymore. And so I lean on her, and I trust that when she says her intuition tells her this is right, I trust her. And when my daughters say they want space to do something, I try to provide it. But I don't try to occupy it. I don't try to force it. I don't try to. I make sure that my values come across, but ultimately it's their choice to side with them on that. And I try to safeguard that choice because in life they won't have many of them. Yeah.
That's one other thing.
Yes.
It's very specific.
Yeah.
Because Aziz was just telling me that he's turning the basement of this place into a big fungi factory.
Okay.
He's creating mushrooms here.
I did not expect you to say that at all. Everyone went, wait a minute, what now? Is it?
Because you brought up fungi.
Indeed.
And it was, and it was, so it's George Washington Carver, who is fascinated by
Thank
fungi.
you. No one has brought this up, so thank you.
I love fungi. What's interesting about it, and the reason I bring it up is that, from my perspective, we now think about Paul Stamets and he writes about fungi, and we talk about Merlin Sheldrake and Entangled Life and all these books that are coming. Like, I don't know if you know Merlin Sheldrake's book called Entangled Life, which is just this fascinating book about fungi. And after I read that, I looked at the table of contents, and I was like, I looked at the not the table of contents, but the index. And I was like, did he talk about George Washington? Guess what? So, first off, what is this about George Washington Carver and fungi? Where did you get that from? Why is it in the book?
I think, okay, the dynamic between this is not a spoiler. It's not a spoiler, but I'm going to go on a bit of a tangent because I just love this kind of stuff. But the idea of the simultaneity of darkness and connectedness, right? So in underneath the earth, the fungi are growing and they're communicating, and they don't care anything about what's happening above the surface. And so I really love that idea, and I was like, let's bring that together. And the book lives in this sort of collective consciousness space, and how are we tapping into the collective consciousness? I was thinking about that. And then I was reading about George Washington Carver, and I was reading about how he helped Ford develop the plants, the plants to build the cars, and he designed it off plant systems. And I'm reading this, I'm like, who is this dude? Like, what? And I started to research him, and someone said, and I don't know if this is true, it was in a documentary that I heard, that he used to walk the field and talk to the plants. And he would walk early in the morning where he could hear the plants, and they would tell him what they could do. And I thought, what kind of technology is that? Like, how do we find that technology? Because imagine a world where all your medicinal needs, you can walk outside and talk to a plant and say, what do I need? And they can respond to you. I was like, I want that. I want that. That sounds like the future to me. And so I was living in that space, and I was like, okay, if we are in a collective communication together, that means we're probably in a collective communication with the whole world. And if so, we'd be in communication with these plants, and we'd be operating in a completely different place. And then this is a whole thing, but I was way into the deep in the study of the movie Dune and the book by Frank Herbert. And his whole thing was this it was space, but as a prerequisite, they banned computers. And so the ban, what they call thinking machines, there was a whole AI thing. They banned AI. I think we're on the path, to be honest. And they banned AI, and they were like, we have to build all of our systems, societal, scientific, off of biology first, both with the planet and ourselves. And they developed interstellar travel that way. And I was like, I want to figure that out. So that's how I got there. That's a tangent. I'm telling you, when I get into my science fiction stuff, I'm like in it. But I love that question. No one's asked me that yet, and it gives me a lot of joy to answer it. So thank you. Yes, ma'am.
I have another question. Sorry.
No, it's okay.
So you said that you're living in the UK now. I was just wondering if you're familiar at all with Valerie Blackman and her.
I was gonna.
Oh, sorry.
Valerie Blackman?
So, as someone's dual heritage growing up in the UK, one of the things my parents did was make sure that I read books by Black British authors that centre Black characters. And so she's a Black British author. I actually got to meet her a few times. It's really cool. And she has this book series called Noughts and Crosses, which imagines a flipped world. So black people on top and white people are on the bottom, and it's small things, like small details that she puts, where one of the characters gets a cut and they need a plaster, but the plaster band-aid doesn't match. My husband's American, so I'm used to like
band-aid.
And it doesn't match the color of
the skin.
Skin. They're a white character, and all the band-aids plasters are made to match black skin. And so there's like these small details. And I think this must have been like the 90s, because I think I was like, I don't know, I was young when this came out, and it wasn't well received. And then the BBC recently did like an adaptation, which was really bad, but also not well received. And then your book is taking it further, and just being like, let's get rid of them. And so I wonder, I think like with her book, for me, like growing up and things like, I know like we watch Jingle Jangle at Christmas, which is like not necessarily related, but it's just nice to see black people centered, and it's not necessarily, you know, about how they relate to white people, or like we were talking about the black experience earlier. And I'm listening to the questions, and I feel like some of the questions are, this is a relief, this is like really great, and then some of the other questions seem to be more a case of, well, what about, you know, slavery, or like don't hold on to hate, and these are the conversations that I find I have a lot with my husband's family. My husband's white American, and they'll ask me questions about, you know, what do you think about that? You know, statistically they commit more crimes, and I'm just like, I can't be in this conversation. One, two, I can't speak for the Black American experience because I'm not Black American, and so I just wondered, do you notice a difference between your audience and their identity, and then how they receive your book?
Oh yeah, definitely. One of my favorite talks that I gave was in Brighton at Afarori bookstore, and it was interesting because it's Afarori bookstore, but it was all white people in the audience. There you go. And it was interesting, just engaging that the position was not. They're not having a global diaspora conversation, is ultimately what it is on either side. So in America, black people are very specifically talking about the Black American experience, and they talk about America, and they talk about, it's almost like it's there's a gate around the continent, this gate around America, not the continent. And it's like, it's very hard to go, yeah, but do you know what happened in Belgium? Do you know what's happening in Sudan? And there's a relationship between those two things. The same system that is in opposition here is in opposition here. And then when I'm in England, it's similar, but it's grounded in a point of origin. So they're like, in Nigeria, this is what we're dealing with, but I ain't really talking about anyone else. And they're almost talking at each other. So the Nigerians are, you know, talking to people from Benin and, you know, people from Cameroon, but they're not in the global diaspora conversation. The people who I find are the Caribbeans. When I sit with anyone from the islands, they are, man, they're tapped in. They know everybody. And if you ever sit and talk to a Haitian, they know everyone. They're connected to everyone. And they're really interested in the sort of elevation of all of it. And I think it's in part because they want to sit at the seat of it. One of the most powerful conversations I ever had was with, I want to say she was from Guadeloupe, I think. But she was the first person to give me a document called the Combahee River Statement. You ever heard of this before? Has anybody in here ever heard of the Combahee River Statement? It is the most extraordinary thing I've ever read. It's an essay that was written in the 60s, and it was all the black women who were part of the Black Panther movement. They were also a part of the feminist movement. And with the Black Panther, they were like, this is very male dominated. And although we side with you and we love what you're doing, this isn't speaking to our needs. And then they would go to the feminist movement and they're like, we love it. We love what you're doing, but this is about the white female needs. This has nothing to do with our needs. And so they created their own. And what it said is that when you center the needs of these people, this specific group, it raises everyone. And I read this and I was like, what is this? And she goes, this is how we fix the world. We have to be talking up here, not down here. And so I find in every place that I've been, one of the places I've stopped in the Philippines, a place called Cagayan de Oro. It's a tiny town 3 hours south of Manila. I'm in this little bookstore. And this guy says two things that happened that were extraordinary. One of the guys said, I look like 50 Cent. And I was like, also, one dude called me LeBron James. And I was like, bruh, like what? That was weird. And then another guy told me, he goes, I expected you to curse more. And I was like, curse more? What does that mean? He goes, I just expect you're a Black American, so you're coming with the Black American. I was like, and he's Black. And I was like, what does that mean to you? And he goes, well, you guys are leading. You guys are the ones who are changing everything. And I was like, no, bro, we're trying to include you. We're trying to come down and be connected to you. And we couldn't get into a dialogue. But by the end of it, the kid had been completely transformed. We weren't talking at each other from a distance. We were in a room together and having a conversation about how we advance the culture that we all love and share in. And that came after I had read that Combahee River statement, and it transformed me. It's called the Combahee River Statement. Mm-hmm. Okay. Any more questions? I realize I'm going late. Oh, for how long? And I've got you. I will never not come to you.
No. You've already addressed what I was going to.
I want to know what the question was. I think we all want to know.
So essentially, I think a lot of the conversation that we've been having here in the space has kind of drawn out this distinction between Black people and white people. But I remember hearing you give a talk where you made the distinction that
between
this
whiteness.
it's not about white people, it's about whiteness.
Yes.
Right? And the idea, the concept, and the construct of whiteness and the way it impacts all of us. Because there are people that look like me, darker than me, that move with a whiteness mentality. And I just was going to ask you to talk about that, but you already did. So.
Can I just, before we go off of Hamu, you guys know who this is, right? This is the most talented artist I know walking this earth. And Fahamu and we have an interesting relationship. I always tell people this story because it means so much to me. But this book had just been out, and it was being sort of circulated in different places. And a friend between the two of us, this gentleman named Charlie, had painted something as a response to this book. And I didn't know. I just go on Instagram, and he's going, I've read this book called Sky Full of Elephants, and inspired me to paint this thing. And I was like, oh my God, look, this is extraordinary. And I was really taken aback by the translation of it through someone else's perspective. And I talked to Charlie, and he's telling me about Fahamu. And I don't know what Fahamu is, but I'm looking at Fahamu. I was like, okay, it's amazing. And so one day I am doing my my DNA test to determine where my family comes from. And while I'm doing this test, funny enough, it's two parts. You have the father's side, the patriarchal line, I think, patrilineal line. And interesting, my father's line is 100% Spanish. And I was like, my mama better be African. She better be. And so I get my mother's back, and it says that she is from Cameroon and that she's a part of the Bamaleke tribe. And so I instantly go online and I look up Bamaleke tribe. And the first thing that comes up is this image of this person in a mask, the mask of the fawn, this huge elephant mask. And I was like, oh my gosh, the elephants. And this is a true story. As I'm looking at this elephant, I get an alert, and it says someone tagged you on Instagram, and it's Fahamu. And I click on the page, and he has a painting of that same elephant mask at the same time. And I was like, who is this brother? I must know this man. And when I met Fahamu for the first time, as few times that I've ever, you talk about frequency and aligning with someone, when you just tap in and you find that artistically